I have a quick disclaimer here about the Shroud, but I'm going to save it for the end because I want you guys to first hear Wes's perspective on the Shroud of Turin, and for that matter, on artifacts and things that are found in archaeology in terms of how they relate to supporting the veracity of Christianity. In terms of archaeological finds, what would be some of your favorite things that we've dug up recently that in some way confirm the historical reliability of the Bible?
I think there are things like the Tel Dan Stele, which was discovered in the 1990s, early 1990s, I want to say 1993. And because before that, prior to that, archaeologists were actually saying that there's no evidence of the historical David. And then you find something like the Tel Dan Stele, which consists of several fragments making up part of a triumphal inscription in Aramaic, potentially by Hazael of Aram, Damascus, who is an important regional figure in the 9th century BC. And it says in, the inscription there, it mentions this phrase, the house of David. Every once in a while, you find something like a Tel Dan Stele, that just kind of gives a mention of something where archaeologists go, okay, maybe there's something more to this than we might think. There are other ones. I'm really interested in some of the seals that we've found. The Shema seal, which is from the 8th and 9th century, which has Jeroboam II mentioned in it, who is the longest reigning king of northern Israel. And he ruled over a period of unparalleled prosperity, taking advantage of a lapse in strong Assyrian control of the Levant. And Jeroboam's name is preserved on the Shema seal, ruling out Jeroboam I, 10th century king of Israel. And the seal depicts a lion, which is realistically shown in a full-throated roar with its tufted tail erect, and several other seals from the late Iron Age also bear these inscriptions that we find on something like the Shema seal, which says it's owned by the servant of the king. I mean, one of my favorites is the Asahardin prism, or also known as Taylor's prism, which includes the story of 2 Kings 19, that has the Assyrian king Sennacherib, who he besieges Israel, and it has this story of the besieging of the areas along the coast in Israel, amongst which is the destruction of Lachish, which is also on. If you go to the British Museum, you can see the Lachish relief. There's a big room which covers the walls, and it was originally in the palace of the Sennacherib. He had this relief that actually chronicled the destruction of a lot of these cities in Israel. And on the 5th column in this prism, it mentions that the Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, had walled up the king of Jerusalem in his royal city, and I think it says like a bird in a cage. So, these things work in conjunction as corroborative data. I think it's very important to note, because sometimes I see people using archaeology online as this kind of silver bullet proof text. Because we found city A, and that's also mentioned in the Bible, then story A in the Bible is true. And I don't think that's the point of archaeology. The point of archaeology is to incorporate collaborative data that ultimately points to the general reliability of these stories. And we continue to find things that mention people and places and times that work to give us confidence that when we read the Bible and, these archaeological inscriptions, a lot of them, the oldest ones, talking about Old Testament things, that gives us confidence that, these things are actually talking about real places and real times and real people. And we as Christians can have confidence in that.
This is a really interesting point, because I think that this same concept applies in a few different areas where the skeptic will sort of look for one single argument or one single data point to say that if that thing doesn't get you all the way there, then therefore Christianity is not true. And so I guess my question would be, how important do you think that idea of the case for Christianity being true is a cumulative case, that it is a matter of a preponderance evidence being formed together, not some one singular, slam dunk argument or something like that. How essential is that understanding for the skeptic to come to?
Yeah, I think that's vital, in that the Christian worldview has a number of intersecting fields. I mean, Christian apologetics is kind of a tricky overarching field because it incorporates history and philosophy, and there are multiple different lines of evidence pointing to the reliability and the ultimate truth claims of the Christian worldview. And I grant that there are certain ones that I don't find convincing that other people do. And I think that apart from, the ultimate proof, which is the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that you could actually throw out a number. If you don't find, say, the moral argument hugely convincing, or you don't find some aspect of the historical reliability of the Gospels hugely convincing, or you don't find some of the archaeological data convincing, it doesn't invalidate your entire faith. Now, I think that a lot of those things are intercrossing with one another, and that gives us that cumulative case. But I mean, even something like the Shroud of Turin, I don't find the Shroud of Turin hugely convincing one way or the other for anything in particular. But I have some friends who that's kind of their thing that really solidifies the truthfulness of, there was a historical Jesus for them. And so I can dismiss that and say, I'm willing to have my mind changed, but ultimately the Shroud of Turin does nothing for me.
Why not?
I don't, I'm not huge into icons. Like, I think the historical reliability of the New Testament in particular is so overwhelming that whether the Shroud is true or not, it really doesn't matter to me. There are also some other things. I mean, I know that there have been some investigations that have come out recently that have pointed more to its kind of first century credibility in that. But I also, a mentor of mine had a connection at the University of Turin who wrote an article, I think it was called the Roman Scourge and the Scourging of the Son of Man, something like that, where he investigated the wounds and was an expert in Roman flagrums, and actually said that the wound marks on the Shroud of Turin aren't conclusive in terms of being corroborated to a Roman flagrum, and actually could match Middle Age whips and weaponry more accurately. But it's all these things, right? It's just the New Testament does not sit on the Shroud of Turin being reliable one way or the other. And I think that the historical evidence that we do find for, say, early eyewitness testimony in the Gospels and in the rest of the New Testament in terms of its reliability, I think are just so overwhelming in my own mind, in my own investigation, that something like the Shroud of Turin, if it's legitimate, I mean, that's pretty cool. But ultimately, it doesn't impact what I believe about the truthfulness of Christianity that isn't substantially grounded in the case for the historical reliability of the person of Jesus recorded in the Gospels.
As the evidence continues to point towards the veracity of the shroud and the fact that it is actually authentic, so long as that is true, that is awesome. I am totally for there being an Easter egg like that left for us, if you will. I shouldn't say Easter egg. A resurrection egg. Well, then actually egg doesn't make sense. A resurrection stone left for us, if you will. I'm for that. I think that's great. The point here, though, is if everything rests on the shroud, and if it does in some future way come out that the shroud isn't authentic, then everything else falls with that. And I think that's the main point here, is this is why I was asking Wes about the multiple lines of evidence, so the cumulative case for Christianity being true. I think that's extremely important because picture a tapestry, right, with thousands of threads forming the picture of reality. Maybe the shroud is one of those threads, I would say, and maybe you would even say it's a huge, it's a bunch of threads making up a huge part of the picture. That's fine. I think the thing here, though, is just not to put all of our faith in artifacts. I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.